a significant number of New York Jews voted for Mamdani because of his stance on Israel. Every candidate on the stage, like 6 of them, said, I'll go to Israel, I'll go to Israel, I'll go to Israel, I'll go to Israel. And Mamdani said, well, I'm going to stay right here in New York because I'm worried about the standard of living of New Yorkers.
It's funny because he was the only one in that debate who actually put America first. He prioritized Americans. He prioritized the people of New York City. And that speaks volumes.
We don't like Israel anymore now. It's getting around. They pushed their luck. They pushed it too far. They're too condescending. They lie too much. They kill too many people. And they demand too much. They're too ungrateful. Constantly insisting we pay their way and bail them out, build and deliver their bombs for them. And people have just had it.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode on TMJ's Political Current podcast. Just a few days ago, Zohran Mamdani made history in New York City, a Muslim candidate who won despite the more than $22 million spent by 26 billionaires trying to stop him. But his victory isn't just a local story, it's the sign of a much bigger political shift within America itself, primarily driven by young voters. Because for the first time, we're seeing Americans across the board question the US relationship with Israel and what it really means to put America first. But to unpack all of what we're hearing, all the controversy and otherwise, and what this could mean for the future of American elections, both local and presidential, I'm speaking today with author and anti-war activist Scott Horton, who's going to help me break it all down. Scott, thank you so much for joining us on TMJ News. Great to have you on. I want to start with something that just happened and somehow has become very controversial, and that is Zohran Mamdani's election win in New York. Now, I want to get your thoughts on that. Are you in the, oh my goodness, he's a Muslim who's now, going to bring Sharia law into America camp, or how do you view this in specific?
No, I'm the, oh my God, he's a communist, absolute idiot. I'm not afraid of Muslims so much. To me, I think America has a real problem with what I call the Bin Ladenites, which is, quite frankly, a political designation. There are, I don't know raw numbers, but something like millions and millions of Salafis and Wahhabis in the world who are not on a political war against the United States of America, but are loyal subjects of whatever kingdom they happen to live in and have no particular beef with the United States at all. And so, and that's, the most supposed, extreme, most fundamentalist edge of Sunni Islam. And yet the Bin Ladenites are more like political Leninists, where they have this revolutionary philosophy of overthrowing all the local sock puppet dictators and establishing their own caliphate and all that. So there is a danger, but it's from a very, very small subset of the Muslim world, if you want to even call it that at all. And so I don't know how religious this guy is or if anybody really asked him, but I think there's no chance whatsoever that he is loyal to the goals of bin Laden and Zawahiri and America's actual Islamist terrorist enemies. So that, for anyone who's afraid of that, you can forget about that. The problem is the guy doesn't understand what a price is for. And he thinks that he can just make decrees and make economies work the way he wants them to work. And yet socialism has been shown to not work, certainly not well, and certainly not in New York City. Is he going to have any success in, as he put it, raising everybody's wages and profits, but without raising anybody's costs? And also everything's going to be free and free childcare. So you won't even have to raise your own children. We'll just have somebody else do it for you while everyone works all the time at their new jobs where they make more than ever before, but never have to pay more, which is just complete ridiculous idiot commie claptrap that I would expect to hear from a freshman at junior college. And to think that a guy whose understanding of how markets work is as absolutely idiotic and even like 18th century as that is going to be the mayor of the most important city in the world, certainly the most important city in the United States, the financial capital of the United States of America, is a horror show. And I don't know what's going to happen. I guess probably what's going to happen is he's going to move hard to his right until he reaches exact center, just like everybody else in the Democratic Party, and he's going to do what he can. I can't imagine he's going to actually get away with all this stuff about, oh, he's just going to freeze everyone's rent and he's just going to mandate higher wages for everyone, and the all the buses and trains will be free and faster. And I mean, this stuff is ridiculous. It sounds like an episode of The Simpsons when Homer runs for garbage commissioner and just promises that everything is just going to be perfect now, and he blows the whole year's budget in a week on all of his stupid stuff.
Yeah, to speak to what you're saying, I think one of the reasons, especially the younger voters, we know that 75% of voters under the age 30 voted for Mamdani, and many are, interpreting that as really a distress call coming from the younger generation because they have been experiencing, unemployment, going and getting higher education, but not being able to find a job, struggling with rent. Really, a lot of it is based in this economic pressure that many of the young generation is facing. And because Mamdani has really centered his campaign around economic relief, I think that's what has drawn a lot of, especially younger New Yorkers, to his campaign. So, going back to what you're saying, this is a candidate that's promising relief, and it seems as though many are banking on that promise. How do you think that's going to deliver, if at all?
Yeah, no, I think it'll be a disaster, but you're absolutely right that he ran on, "Hey, I actually care about you," whereas, Cuomo did not, and Cuomo, of course, was the governor who, mandated a totalitarian system of lockdowns during COVID, and then on top of that, took all of the elderly patients in the hospitals who were diagnosed, were proven to have had COVID, and he sent them all home to the nursing homes to infect everybody else. I mean, this is a guy who should have been exiled out of our country 4 years ago, and the fact that he was the best the Democrats could come up with to put up against the, socialist insurgent is just that speaks volumes right there, that that was the best that they thought that they could do to stop him, and then on top of that, Cuomo actually ran on, "You don't love Israel enough." And I guess thinking, well, that'll please the donors and the donors will cough up the money. But what about the population of the city? And the polls show that a substantial minority of New York's Jews voted for Mandami because that didn't impress them at all. And in fact, I don't know the exact overlap of votes in the polling, um, but a significant number of New York Jews voted for Mandami because of his stance on Israel, or at least they said because of Israel was like the issue. In other words, heavily implying because of his opposition to Israel, his threat even to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu. Cuomo's assumption was that every Jew in New York just wants to hear him praise Israel and attack this guy for not being loyal to Israel enough. Even after, I'm sure you remember, they did this famous debate. It'll probably go down in history, in fact. This
100%. Yeah.
debate where every candidate on the stage, like 6 of them, said, "I'll go to Israel. I'll go to Israel. I'll go to Israel. I'll go to Israel." And all the way at the end of the line, like it was scripted, all the way at the end of the line, all the way to the left, stage left, Mandami said, "Well, I'm going to stay right here in New York because I'm worried about the standard of living of New Yorkers." Right. So that doesn't mean he knows the first thing about how to fix the standard of living of New Yorkers, but it means that he said to them, "I actually care about you." And then even after that, Cuomo ran not on, "Oh, yeah, no, I care about you too," but on Israel still. And right after, did he forget that we all just saw Israel kill upwards of 100,000 people, the super majority of them innocent civilians, and completely demolish their entire society? That Netanyahu, their prime minister, is a wanted war criminal right now with a warrant out for his arrest, and that the amount of political capital that and sway that Israel pulls, especially among American voters right now, even in New York City, is at an all-time low, and he was just completely deaf to that. It's funny, right? Because it was Cuomo, the center-left liberal, running on the identity politics, and it was the leftist socialist who was running on economics rather than just woke stuff this time, you know?
Yeah, and what you're saying, and I want to take a few moments to speak about that because many are actually saying that debate that you referenced is going to become a defining moment, not just for this specific election, but a clip and an instance that many are going to keep referring to because it's representative of a very significant reality in America right now, and that is how the degree to which Israel is prioritized. And really, you're right in saying that Mamdani's campaign really, I think, set him apart specifically with that issue because, as you said, every other candidate said they'd go to Israel. It wasn't just them saying we want to go to Israel. It was them saying, competing to see who loves Israel more, who has been to Israel more times, who has more allegiance to Israel. And the question that arises, especially on the right saying, someone like Mamdani, who is African born Muslim, and many of them view him as the outsider. It's funny because he was the only one in that debate who actually put America first. He prioritized Americans. He prioritized, the people of New York City, and
Mhm.
that speaks volumes. And I want to get your thoughts on that. What do you think? What do you make of that? What do you think that really says about patriotism and loyalty and how it's defined in U.S. politics right now?
Yeah, well, look, I think the bottom line is the Israelis have to lie about everything, and their amen corner in the United States, their war party in the United States, they have to lie about everything because they're the aggressor. They're in the wrong. They're killing people and cleansing them off their land so they can steal it in violation of every moral law and every international law. They're getting away with bloody murder, and they have to have the support of the US government to be able to do that and to obstruct on their behalf in the international institutions. And so they have to keep the American people at the very least confused about who's occupying who started it, who did what. You'll hear even President Trump, he'll say, they've been fighting for thousands of years. No, that is not what this controversy is about at all. Only for little children and presidents who've never read a thing in their lives and rely on the Israelis to tell them things like that about the reality. Because see, that makes it sound like, oh, it's just intractable and we'll just have to stand with our friends. But our friends are totally in the wrong here. And it's not intractable. You have human beings with property rights. And you have some other people from somewhere else who said, but we have supernatural property rights that are these magical different ones that supersede plain old property rights that all Westerners believe in since the days of John Locke. And so they've had to propagandize the American people so much into believing that all Muslims are terrorists, that somehow Israel is like a Western fort on our eastern frontier, holding back the barbarian hordes and all of these messages that they try to send to people. And then what happens though is when people just, when someone who understands shows someone else a map and says, here's who's occupying here's who took what, and here's who's under siege, and ever since when, and here's who Ariel Sharon killed, and the rest, and explain it, then they say, aha. The narrative is so simple, very, very oversimple, like elementary school simple, quote unquote, the Jews who survived the Holocaust in World War II, they had to have some place to go. And there was a land without people for a people without land. And so we put them there. And then, of course, there's a bunch of Arabs trying to cause trouble. But anyway, they'll get theirs. But anyway, these are our friends. And it had to be this way. We have to help them do this. But once you understand that the situation in Israel, Palestine, is that that particular group of people in charge over there, they are the overlords, and there's this whole group of others under their domination, under their military control, who have no civil rights, no civil liberties, no representation, no protection of law at all, but remain under this foreign control and are beaten and killed mercilessly, tortured like animals, and just beyond belief, the cruelty that the Israeli Zionists inflict on their Palestinian captives. Once people realize that whole, oh, these people are always the victim no matter what narrative doesn't hold up anymore. This is why the absolute panic in Israel over their control of American opinion, right? This is why Larry Ellison from Oracle, a diehard loyal Zionist, loyal to Israel, and Netanyahu even particularly, just bought CNN and Paramount and CBS and TikTok to try to just purge all anti-Zionist thought from even being found anywhere on any of those systems. And the thing is, these are dying, desperate gasps of a failing movement. Benjamin Netanyahu just blew Israel's entire public relations wad on his slaughter in Gaza. And he didn't even achieve anything. He didn't get his ethnic cleansing campaign, and he didn't get the defeat of Hamas at all. All he did was kill all those people and turn the American people against Israel. And it's going to be very hard, I think impossible, for them to come back from this. And that's why they're going so hard trying to attack Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and anyone who just again, grows a conscience.
There has definitely been a huge shift among Americans in terms of public opinion. And as you were explaining, it has been the case, especially with APAC and the influence that it has on Congress, that money talks to a point where our politicians, at least, some are actually terrified of speaking out against Israel. I know we have some like Marjorie Greene or others, still, a small current, but it seems like it's growing,
Mhm.
starting to question that, unquestioned support that, the US government has toward Israel. But I do think this recent election, one thing it showed, and I'd like your thoughts on it, 26 billionaires spent a total of $22 million to stop Mamdani from winning the mayoral election. And it didn't work. And although we know that, lobby groups like APAC do have that influence still, but if we look at it on a local level, even that's still pretty significant that this much money went into preventing someone like Mamdani from being elected, and it didn't work. And a lot of it, I think, had to do not just with the younger generation, but this growing awareness that's happening within the American public about what it means for our elected leaders to truly represent Americans. And of course, we can't just attribute all of Mamdani's win to his stance against Israel. But I think significant portion of it, at least in this case, can be at least discussed in terms of what it means for America to slowly be questioning this, forever allegiance to Israel. Do you think that is starting to change within American leadership, at least? Or do you think,
Yeah.
it's so, yeah.
Yes, I mean, there's a huge crack upcoming. It's very exciting, and I don't know what's gonna happen, and it could be very destructive for the Republican and Democratic parties both. We have a situation already almost entirely on the Democratic side. It's hardly an oversimplification to say that on the Democratic side, it's the voters versus the donors and the party owners. The people, the Democratic voters of America have absolutely had it with Israel. No question about that. On the Republican side, they say it's 50-50. I think it's worse than that for Israel now and growing. And because especially, you know, whatever, it's important. It might seem goofy or whatever, but it is important, the social psychology of the whole thing. And what I mean by that is that people are always very concerned about what other people think about what they think, right? And so, you just take the average family in America of whatever color, religion, or whatever state in the union. You just have like someone in that family is thinking, man, I don't know, I sympathize more with the Palestinians. But everyone in that family knows, they think, that the only people who sympathize with the Palestinians are Muslim terrorists and communists, right? But then you see the Tucker Carlson show, and Tucker Carlson says, "Well, I'm just as conservative as I've always been, and I'm just as Christian as ever, and getting more every day or trying. And I'm not okay with this anymore because of how immoral it is by my conservative Christian American standards." Now, in that family, that person who's changing their mind now has Tucker Carlson to be like, right? Or Ron Paul to be like, instead of having to identify with a communist or an Islamist. I'm not a communist or an Islamist. I still think what they're doing to these people is wrong, and I'm not alone in that. There are a lot of people who are not communists or Islamists who are against this because it's wrong. Simple as that. It's just becoming a common knowledge on the right, common feeling on the right among just people's parents and stuff out there in the world that, oh, yeah, kind of, we don't like Israel anymore now. It's getting around. They push their luck, they push it too far. They're too condescending, they lie too much, they kill too many people, and they demand too much. They're too ungrateful and constantly insisting we pay their way and bail them out, and build and deliver their bombs for them. And people have just had it. And so now, what does it mean? Let's fast forward 2 years or even for next year's midterms, but even 2 years after that, 3 years after that, next presidential election, when we have a majority of the population of both parties are anti-Zionist. The liberals and the conservative center, they have blown their whole wad. They died on the hill of supporting Zionism. And so now people are moving further and further to the left and further to the right. And I regret that because I'm a libertarian. I'm not any kind of centrist liberal, but I'm not any kind of nationalist or socialist either. And those beliefs come with a lot of problems too. Um, but the center has discredited themselves just fully now with 25 years of war in a row and just always putting Israel first at the American people's expense. But then out in the country, I expect for people to run for Congress now in both parties on actually think it's time for Israel to go ahead and take responsibility for their own actions and declare independence for ourselves and do what's best for the United States and be willing to say that and see how it goes. The one major brilliance of America's constitutional system is the direct election of representatives to the US House. And, we don't really control the senators, and quite frankly, I think the state legislatures should still pick the senators. It's a better balance of power that way. But still, the US House, it's 435 tiny little districts across the country. And the Israelis and their lobby just can't dictate 435 races. Now they can sometimes, and we saw where there were some anti-Zionists in the Democratic Party that got ran out in the last election. Jamal Bowman was one, and another lady, a black woman, I forget her name. They got targeted by APAC and they got destroyed. But you only got so many arrows in that quiver, right? And this has been going on for a long time, but mostly under the radar. Where APAC takes out American congressmen. Where now more and more, it's just they're not able to do that without everyone noticing and seeing it and really resenting it. And so even where they win their small victories and small battles, they're losing the war for American public opinion. And by the way, see, there's been this narrative among the Zionists too, of course, that if you don't like Israel, it's just because you hate Jews, and this is your excuse to say bad things about Jews or whatever. But that is so absurd. For anyone who's interested in these topics at all and spends any time on the internet at all, they can tell you that it's so clear that anyone who is actually anti-Semitic, they will tell you that, and they will try to get you to be extremely anti-Semitic too, because that's kind of their whole thing now. Then there are people who are anti-Zionists. And the people who are anti-Zionist and who are against what Israel, the state, does with its power to people and the way they intervene in our politics in the United States and all that, you do not catch those people slipping ever, even late when they're drinking. They don't start talking about the Jews because that wasn't their thing. Public discourse is just too transparent now to just buffalo people, to snowball them, make them believe a bunch of crap. Like if they try to push Iraq's weapons of mass destruction right now, come on. There's no way that they could do it.
100%. And, to close this conversation, I think one of the, going off of what you mentioned Iraq. I think throughout history, we have seen this pattern where usually the public is ahead of the government when it comes to wanting an end to lots of these issues. Whether it was the war in Iraq, we have a lot of different examples, the Vietnam War, even, and we're seeing it now with Israel as well, where the public is starting to demand that their government stops prioritizing Israel, the end to APAC and the influence it has on Congress. But it almost seems as though that's not translating as as quickly or as effectively as it should on a practical level. And I know you're mentioning that at least in elections, we're going to get to a point where people are going to demand that their elected representatives stop taking APAC donations or stop prioritizing Israel, or at least vote those who aren't on that boat. But every time we have this conversation, it's almost as though the money talks. And because
Oh, yeah.
it's so systemic right now and systematically not just systemic but institutional, to a point where we're still seeing publicly, if people go out and protest, oh, that's fine because you're protesting peacefully, you can come out and say you exercised your free speech. But when it goes to institutions, whether it's in people's professional careers, if they were to say something too sensitive, like
Mhm.
how about our government stops prioritizing Israel and putting the interests of Israel over the interests of Americans, they do face consequences, whether it's for their careers or whatnot. So we still haven't gotten to that point. And my final question for you is, when do you think, if at all, it will get to that point?
Yeah, you're right. It's very difficult, and this is just kind of a side point, but I don't know, it's worth mentioning, I guess, that if we had an extremely limited and constitutional government where its only real job was criminal law and civil courts for settling disputes and protecting the country, then democracy might even work if those were the issues that we had to address and keep control of, right? That was that's what when it comes to national issues, if those are the just couple of things for us to pay attention to, is the few kind of criminal and civil matters that belong on the national level and a simple foreign policy of maintaining the peace, something like that, then we wouldn't have this issue like you're talking about, where the empire itself is so big that then when the Israeli lobby and their neocon minions and think tanks and everyone have infiltrated so much of that system, now it's all of that that has to be repealed or, somehow disinfected from this foreign infiltration when we just shouldn't have these apparatus in the first place. Get rid of the national security state, get rid of the empire, and then the Israelis are just wasting their time. So I think that should be our number one option is rolling back American power to the point where they decide to go and bribe somebody else to do their dirty work for them instead of us. That's really the future. And then, yes, you're right. It is going to be a huge. That's what I'm saying. Is going to be a crack up, but it's going to be a hell of a one. If you think of like a rubber band stretching, the longer it stretches, and it's sort of like an economic bubble. The longer you let it go, the worse the crash is coming. And they have inflated American support for Israel to such a degree, but there is a correction coming and they're not going to be able to stop it. And then at some point, I mean, you can already see this on the Democratic side where congressmen show up to do a town hall and the people in the audience just aren't having it. They're like, "You take APAC money, you're scum, you support genocide, get the hell out of here. You're done. None of us in this room respect you. Beat it, punk." And it's like, "Whoa." And there, in fact, I saw that it was the funniest thing. I have to mention, I have to give credit to anonymous Twitter man because there was one where it was like the almost proverbial angry, woke, young white girl screaming at this guy, but he is a black man. The congressman is a black man. And she's screaming at him, "You support genocide. You support genocide." And the guy on Twitter remarked that, like, wow, isn't it nice that she didn't have to like stop and acknowledge all of his like intersectional, like wokest criteria first that like as a black congressman and I am a white lesbian and then like she just said, "You support genocide." It's like, finally, we're back to putting all of the absolute idiotic intersectional stuff aside and just get right to the point. Doesn't matter what his identity is. What matters is he's a member of the House of Representatives, which means he has the power of the purse, and she is holding his sorry ass responsible for taking bribes from a foreign lobby to commit the American people and our society and our government and country to horrific, unpardonable sins on behalf of a foreign power. What do you have to say for yourself, scumbag? And he's standing there going, duh, 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 has nothing to say. She just completely destroyed him. And all of a sudden, who's black and who's white and who's a lesbian and who's a trans and who all of this intersectional stuff all went away. He's genocidal and she's got a problem with that. And that's all we need to know. And that's all he needs to know is like, crap, how am I supposed to show up at a town hall ever again without changing my ways first? So that is already happening on the left and it's going to keep happening on the right. And then by the time the real correction comes and things actually change, I don't know how long that'll take. I did say, not exactly tongue in cheek, maybe a little hopefully, but I don't think totally unrealistically. Okay, mostly unrealistically, but not totally unrealistically. I tweeted last December, I said, Donald Trump may be the most Zionist president America's ever had, but he may be the last one. And I think there's gonna be a real controversy. I think, hell, you could already tell in the Talking Point, USA, events that are happening and things like this, that, um, JD Vance is not going to be able to run on Israel first. He is going to have to run on, well, now Israel has their interests and we have ours and we're good friends and we're gonna have to, but there's gonna be have to hell be a lot of nuance in what he runs on there. He's not just gonna be able to like wave a Lindsey Graham flag and all hail Zion. It ain't never gonna work, not even on the Republican side. Not anymore. It really is more and more. It's just it's one of the issues that just completely divides the elite from the people of this country. And on the Republican right, I mean, I should really be checking the polls every week, but I know at the very minimum, it was 50% of Republicans said that they sided with the Palestinians. It was more than 50% said that they wanted a ceasefire immediately. And this was back when the war was still going on a few weeks ago. And they were saying, support for the ceasefire was more than 50% of Trump voters, self-identified MAGA voters, because, and it's just so obvious, right? You can't run on America first and then actually just do nothing but Israel instead without people noticing. You know what I mean? Like George Bush mumbled something about a humble foreign policy, but like, yeah, right. He never meant it and no one really believed it. And most Americans did not understand that he was going to be a foreign policy president as a Bush son up there. So that was not really as like shocking a betrayal here. Where Trump ran on, man, screw George Bush and his stupid brother too. They ruined everything. Now it's on me to fix it. So that's a different thing. That's more than a humble foreign policy. That's I'm the greatest peacemaker of all time and all of that. Well, you can't do that while you're killing kids every day. So and spending our money doing it and generating new enemies for our civilian population to have to deal with, generating new refugees from countries where Americans have had their fill of migration from the third world right now and would at least like a pause to try to assimilate the new people that we do have at the very least. And so even now, I mean, it's this huge tension inside the Trump coalition. Who knows how long it can last? We're not even 1 year through this. And it's Israel that's done this to Donald Trump. He ought to resent them. It ain't the anti-Zionists. It's the Israelis who have put him in this position where there are so many people in the party who are sick and tired of it. But then you have the enforcers trying to kick them out for daring to be sick and tired of it. And this huge controversy over that. And so it's just going to get more and more controversial. And I think the good guys are going to win. And not least of all, because we have the great Tucker Carlson on our side. I mean, he is, other than Donald Trump himself, he's the most important man on the American right in this country. And there's nothing that they can do about it. And he's smart and he's good. So they're screwed.
Well, thank you so much, Scott, for joining us on TMJ News. I really appreciate you coming on, and thanks for sharing your perspective.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
If you like what you see here at TMJ News, don't forget to like and share and subscribe to our channel for more weekly interviews. TMJ News is an independent, grassroots media outlet, and you can find ways to support us by reading the caption below. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode, and I hope you liked it.